Have you ever been there? You find an old $20 bill in a forgotten jacket pocket, and suddenly it feels like, I don't know, free money. Just begging for a little treat.
Oh, absolutely. I know I've done that.
Yeah, me too. And that $20 feels so separate from my regular income, almost like a guilt-free pass to splurge on that fancy coffee I'd never usually buy, right? Even though, logically, it's still just $20.
Exactly. Or, maybe you get a work bonus,
Mm-hmm.
and that extra cash feels like an invitation to finally buy that gadget you've been eyeing. A sort of guilt-free indulgence again.
If any of this sounds familiar, well, you've experienced a really fascinating concept: mental accounting. It's basically how we psychologically code, categorize, and evaluate our financial activities.
And it often leads to decisions that seem, well, let's be honest, maybe a little irrational sometimes.
Definitely. So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack why our brains create these invisible buckets for our money. We'll look at how this impacts everything from our daily spending to major investment choices.
And how it might even manifest differently across various age groups, which is really interesting.
Crucial, yeah. And what strategies we can maybe use to master our money minds,
Yeah.
for more intentional financial outcomes. Let's jump in.
Sounds good.
So to start us off, what exactly is mental accounting, and where did this whole concept come from?
Right. So mental accounting. It's a term coined by the economist Richard Thaler back in 1985. It describes the set of, let's say, cognitive operations individuals use to manage their money.
Cognitive operations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The core insight is that money isn't truly fungible in our minds,
Yeah.
Interchangeable. While a dollar is always a dollar mathematically,
Sure.
we often treat it differently based on where it came from, its source, or maybe its intended use.
Ah, okay.
And Thaler's work actually built on some earlier concepts, like Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory.
Right, I've heard of that. Gains and losses relative to a starting point.
Exactly. It helps us understand why we're so affected by things like the sunk cost effect, where past investments kind of irrationally influence future decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, this whole psychological process can lead to what economists might call irrational decisions,
Yeah.
because our internal mental accounting system often operates really differently from basic economic logic.
That's a really powerful insight, that money isn't truly interchangeable in our heads. So it's not just about having different bank accounts. It's like our brains are setting up these invisible ledgers, making $1 feel different from another.
That's a great way to put it. Invisible ledgers, yeah.
Can you give us some practical examples? Like, where does this play out in everyday life?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. Maybe you treat a tax refund as found money, right?
Yeah, totally.
Use it for discretionary items, something fun.
Yeah.
Rather than maybe using it for debt reduction or adding to savings. It just feels different because it's extra. Or consider income from a side hustle. Lots of people keep that completely separate, earmarking it just for entertainment or hobbies, instead of, integrating it into their overall financial plan.
Guilty is charged on that one sometimes.
Huh, yeah. And another common one is viewing money in a retirement account as completely off limits for anything non-essential, even if, maybe strategically, using a tiny portion could actually achieve a more pressing financial goal right now.
Okay, wow.
These are always, our brains create those invisible buckets, leading to these really distinct emotional connections to different pools of money.
So, okay, we've seen how our brains create these mental categories, but the source of the money, like whether it's a bonus, a windfall, or our regular paycheck, that seems like it could dramatically influence which mental bucket it lands in, right? And how we treat it.
Absolutely, the source is huge.
So let's dig into that. How does, say, a work bonus compare to our regular salary when it comes to spending or saving decisions?
Well, putting this in a broader context, that Reddit discussion we looked at gave a pretty clear picture here. A lot of people, like that original poster who was a chef, they kind of assume a bonus is just extra cash,
Yeah.
But employers often use them quite differently.
How so?
Well, the general consensus, and this is important, is that bonuses are not usually considered part of your regular salary. They're part of your total compensation, sure, but they're often discretionary, not guaranteed.
Ah, okay. That's a key difference.
And they are always taxed. Sometimes the withholding might seem higher than on regular income, but your actual year-end tax liability is based on your total income anyway.
Gotcha.
Companies might use bonuses strategically, maybe to keep day-to-day overhead lower, or sometimes maybe less scrupulously, as a kind of scheme to pay employees less overall, sort of a bait and switch like that chef felt they experienced.
Wow.
And bonuses are also often excluded from things like severance pay and unemployment benefits. That's another really key distinction.
That's important to know.
Definitely. Now, sometimes, like for relocation, companies might gross up a bonus. That means they add extra money to cover the expected taxes, so you actually receive the intended after-tax amount.
Okay.
So, yeah, while a bonus might feel like free money to our mental accounting system, it rarely is in the traditional sense. It's earned, it's taxed, and it's part of a larger compensation structure.
It's clear then that even within our earned income, our psychology differentiates between regular salary and a bonus. But what about money that feels truly free, like an unexpected windfall, finding money, or even a lottery win? Do those funds get treated in yet another mental account, maybe with even less attachment?
That's a critical question, yeah. And research from Avantis investors really shed some light on this. It showed that people generally tend to spend rather than save financial windfalls.
Really? Spend them?
Yeah. There's this story of Nancy, a salesperson. She got a $50 bonus unexpectedly at a hotel in the Bahamas and apparently just gambled it all away. And she later regretted it, specifically noting she wouldn't have spent her earned money that way. See the difference?
Yeah, definitely.
There's experimental proof, too. One study found participants who got a surprise $5 payment for taking part in a study spent twice as much of it at a basketball game afterwards compared to those who were expecting the payment.
Oh, interesting.
And similarly, grocery shoppers who used $10 coupons ended up spending more overall, often on stuff they didn't typically buy.
So the unexpectedness makes us loosen the purse strings.
It seems so.
Yeah.
Windfalls feel unearned, somehow less valuable. They often get categorized mentally as house money that can be spent more freely, unlike, say, money owed, like a rebate or our hard-earned salary.
Okay, house money. I like that term.
And another really striking aspect is effort. The effort we put into earning money seems to impact our risk tolerance.
How so?
Well, hard-earned money creates a greater sense of ownership, right?
Hmm.
And a desire not to lose it. So that leads to lower risk tolerance compared to easy money or windfalls.
So our feelings about money are just profoundly tied to how we get it. That's quite a revelation.
It really is.
But what about the act of actually spending the money? Does that also come with its own psychological cost? You hear about the pain of paying, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's another powerful psychological factor playing out. The OSC Investor Office explains it well. How you feel about spending money influences your behavior.
Okay.
And studies consistently show a greater pain of paying when using cash compared to, say, credit cards.
Why cash? Because it's more tangible.
Exactly. Cash is tangible. Handing over physical bills feels different, more real, more like a loss than tapping a card or clicking buy now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Frictionless payment.
Precisely. And this often leads to overspending with credit cards or digital payments, despite the fact that logically a dollar is a dollar regardless of the payment method. It's about the psychological impact or lack thereof of seeing that physical money leave your hand.
So that lack of friction can subtly push us towards more impulse spending.
That's the idea. The pain is minimized, so the barrier to spending is lower.
It's fascinating how ingrained these patterns are in adult behavior, but what about younger minds? Is our financial psychology different when our brains are still, actively developing, like in our teenage years?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And yes, it seems to be quite different.
How does that manifest?
Well, the Atlantis Press study on mental accounting among teenagers provides some really fascinating insights. Teenagers are still undergoing significant cognitive development, right? And that shapes their financial decision-making quite uniquely.
Okay.
Let's quickly touch on a concept most people know, the sunk cost fallacy. That tendency to stick with something just because you've already invested time, money, or effort, even if it's clearly not the best path forward anymore.
Right, throwing good money after bad, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. But what's really interesting here is how teenagers demonstrate this bias even more intensely than adults.
More intensely, wow.
Yeah. While both groups, teens and adults, are more influenced by the sunk cost of emotions, effort, and time, maintaining friendships or hobbies they've invested a lot in, teenagers exhibit this to a much greater degree. And they seem to pay less attention to the sunk cost of actual money or even confidence compared to adults.
That's quite a distinction. So why? Why do teenagers feel the sunk cost fallacy so much more intensely, especially with emotions and time? What's driving that?
Well, a few things seem to be going on. One key insight is something called narrow framing. Teenagers tend to view each decision more separately, often ignoring other mental accounts that might be affected.
So they don't see the bigger picture as easily.
Kind of. If a decision impacts both, say, their time and their effort, they might only focus on one aspect, which can lead to poorer decisions overall.
Okay.
Also, their mental accounts are described as more mobile and ambiguous, more fluid, less defined than adults. Meaning a sunk cost in one area, like effort spent studying for a test they then fail, might be mistakenly attributed to another area, like the emotional cost of not continuing with that subject. It amplifies uncertainty.
Huh. That's complex.
And this is critical. Adolescence is a period of intense identity development, right?
Yeah.
And a huge investment in relationships. As they're trying on different behaviors and identities, their mental accounts are naturally more fluid. Plus, you've got hormonal changes giving more weight to social and emotional rewards. This contributes to their extremely high consideration of the sunk cost of emotion, especially when it comes to dilemmas involving friends or romantic relationships.
So emotions just play an even bigger role for teenagers, especially with that focus on identity and social connection. How does this translate to how they perceive losses? That's another cornerstone of behavioral economics, right? Loss aversion.
Exactly. This brings us right to loss aversion, that basic human instinct to avoid losses, which typically feels about twice as painful as acquiring an equivalent gain. And here, again, we see a difference. Teenagers are generally found to be less loss tolerant than adults.
Less tolerant, meaning they feel losses more acutely.
That's right. They feel losses more sharply and are more likely to try and avoid them. Now, there are similarities too. Both groups are pretty intolerant of losing things like old possessions, their job, or a good reputation.
Okay.
And both are more tolerant of, say, losing the ability to walk, which is maybe surprising, or getting less pay. But interestingly, teenagers are more tolerant of being fired or having to change a familiar way of working compared to adults.
That is interesting. Why are they less loss tolerant overall then if they're more okay with some specific losses, like getting fired?
The thinking is because teenagers have fewer and more ambiguous, more fluid mental accounts. Any perceived loss, whether it's money or status or whatever, becomes more fungible, more easily spread across these different counts.
So a loss in one area bleeds over more easily.
Exactly. A relatively small loss in one specific mental bucket can easily amplify and feel like a larger cross-account loss, increasing their overall feeling of loss aversion.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've explored how the source of money, like bonuses versus salary, and our age, like teens versus adults, deeply influence our financial psychology. But what happens when people feel like they just don't have enough resources at all? Does a perception of scarcity change these mental accounting rules even further?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
This brings in the powerful concept of a scarcity mindset, which was explored really well in that PMC study.
Scarcity mindset. Okay.
It's basically the belief or the feeling that resources are limited and you can never really have enough. And this mindset has a huge influence on consumer behavior.
How does it influence us?
Well, a scarcity mindset tends to shift our attention squarely onto immediate needs. It creates a significant cognitive load. It takes up brain space, basically. And it can lead to behaviors that might seem irrational from the outside, like impulsive purchases to meet an immediate perceived need or even overborrowing. Interestingly, it can actually lead to spending money for those immediate needs rather than saving, especially for people who experienced scarcity earlier in life, like in childhood.
Wow, so a scarcity mindset can ironically lead to more immediate spending, not necessarily less overall.
It can, yeah, because the focus becomes so narrow and short term.
So what's the most significant impact you saw of this scarcity mindset on how we spend different types of money, like windfalls versus earned money?
One of the most striking findings from that study was what they called a crucial asymmetric effect. It particularly influences how we spend windfall gains like lottery winnings on hedonic versus utilitarian consumption.
Okay, break that down. Hedonic versus utilitarian.
Sure. Hedonic consumption is about pleasure, experience, enjoyment. Think a really nice meal at a high-quality restaurant or a luxury hotel stay.
Got it. Fun stuff.
It's exactly. Utilitarian consumption is about necessity, function, practicality. Things like a canteen card for basic meals or a large home appliance like washing machine.
Okay. necessary stuff.
Right. And typically, happy money, like windfalls, tends to get mentally earmarked for hedonic pleasures, while unhappy money or hard-earned money goes towards utilitarian items. That's the baseline mental accounting tendency.
All makes sense.
But here's the key finding. A high scarcity mindset significantly inhibits this tendency to spend windfall gains on hedonic consumption.
Inhibits it, meaning scarcity makes you less likely to splurge with found money.
Exactly. So if you win the lottery, but you operate with a high scarcity mindset, you're far less likely to splash out on that fancy restaurant or luxury experience.
Can you give an example from the study?
Yeah, they found Chinese students who won a small lottery prize often chose a high-quality restaurant as a reward. But if those students also had a high scarcity mindset, they were significantly less likely to make that choice.
Interesting.
And similarly, adults with lottery winnings lean towards choosing a high-quality hotel stay. But again, this preference was drastically reduced if they had a high scarcity mindset.
And what about hard-earned money? Did scarcity affect spending there?
Importantly, no. The scarcity mindset did not significantly affect choices for hard-earned money in the study. People generally continued to earmark that for utilitarian items, regardless of whether they felt scarce or not.
Okay, so scarcity really clamps down on using free money for fun, but not so much on using earned money for practical things. That makes a certain kind of intuitive sense.
It does, doesn't it? It suggests scarcity makes us much more practical, even with money that might otherwise feel consequence-free.
Were there any cultural or other practical factors that might reinforce this effect, maybe especially in the adult group?
Yeah, zooming out a bit, the study did suggest a couple of things. For adults, a larger windfall, they tested like 3,000 RMB versus 100 RMB for students, might actually increase the perceived pain of payment, specifically for hedonic items, making them even less likely to splurge.
So a bigger prize makes the potential waste feel worse.
Possibly, yeah. Also, cultural values definitely play a role. Things like the emphasis on thrift in Chinese culture, where the study was done, and just the practical realities of adult responsibilities, right? Like supporting a family. Those factors can mean windfalls get funneled into more pragmatic family accounts, maybe paying down debts, covering daily expenses, especially if someone is operating under a scarcity mindset. It really highlights how our context and personal circumstances interact with these deep-seated psychological biases.
Okay, so this has been fascinating, uncovering all these layers. How our brains create these invisible money buckets, how the source matters, how age plays a role, how scarcity changes things. But what does this all mean for us, for the listener? We've got these deep psychological tendencies, but how can we actually use this knowledge to make smarter, more intentional financial decisions in our own lives?
Yeah, that's the critical question, isn't it? Practical application. Richard Thaler himself warned that mental accounting, while natural, can be a pervasive and insidious phenomenon. It can lead to suboptimal choices.
Like what?
Like overspending from certain accounts, maybe that fun money bucket, while underinvesting in really important long-term goals, or just generally inefficient resource allocation. But the good news is there are concrete strategies to counteract this.
Okay, let's hear them. What's the first step?
The first step is simple, but it's profound. Recognize and challenge the biases. It starts with awareness. You have to pay attention to how you mentally categorize your money. Ask yourself, are these categories actually serving my overall financial well-being?
So self-reflection.
Absolutely. Then actively try to embrace the fungibility principle. Consciously remind yourself that all money is interchangeable, regardless of its source. That bonus dollar is just as valuable for paying down high-interest debt as it is for a luxury item. Recognizing that is incredibly powerful.
So the goal is to consciously break down those ingrained mental divisions. That seems key to gaining control.
Exactly. And that leads to the next strategy. Implement a unified financial framework. Instead of all these separate mental accounts, try to view all your money as a single unified whole.
Like one big pot.
Pretty much. Develop a comprehensive financial plan, maybe use an integrated budgeting system that accounts for all income and all expenses together. A formal budget is really helpful here. While mental budgeting alone can be limiting and prone to these biases, a structured, maybe even written budget, the OSC Investor Office suggests using a worksheet can help track your goals and keep you accountable to that unified framework.
Okay, unification and formal budgeting. What else? What about those windfalls?
Right. Another crucial strategy is to conduct a windfall reality check. If you receive unexpected income tax refund, small inheritance, whatever, just pause before spending.
Don't immediately earmark it for fun.
Exactly. Take a moment, consider your debts, Any essential expenses coming up, potential investments first. Plan how you'll use irregular income so it doesn't just evaporate on, disposable purchases.
That takes discipline.
It does. But you can also sort of weaponize these psychological tendencies. Like, you can consciously leverage the pain of paying.
How? Use cash more.
Yeah. If you find you're struggling to stick to a budget, especially with discretionary spending, try using cash for those purchases more often. The tangible act of handing over physical money can increase that psychological pain, making you more mindful and potentially leading to less overall expenditure.
That's clever. Turning a bias into a tool.
Yeah.
What about for people who maybe appreciate simplicity, like maybe a minimalist approach to finances? Is there a strategy there?
Definitely. For those embracing minimalism or just seeking simplicity, one really effective approach is to adopt a minimalist two-bucket system.
2 buckets, okay.
Yeah, radically simplify your finances into just 2 main buckets. One is for spending. This covers all your daily, weekly, monthly expenses, everything that goes out regularly. And the other is for saving and investing. This is for all your financial goals, long-term, short-term, retirement, down payment, everything.
Spending and saving.
Simple. Simple, but powerful. The crucial part is you set a non-negotiable minimum percentage, or maybe a dollar amount, that must go into your savings bucket each pay period or each month. You prioritize that. Then you adjust your spending bucket accordingly to make sure you hit that savings goal.
So savings comes first, spending fits around it.
Exactly. This system can really reduce guilt about spending what's left because you know your saving is taken care of. It ensures consistent progress towards your goals, simplifies budgeting dramatically, and fosters mindful spending that aligns with your values. It really cuts through a lot of that mental accounting clutter.
That sounds really practical. So ultimately, this isn't just about spreadsheets and numbers, is it? It feels more about intentionality.
Completely.
Yeah.
It's about aligning our money with our deepest values, recognizing these inherent psychological biases we all have, and using that understanding to reduce financial stress and hopefully build a more fulfilling life.
Yeah. So today we took a pretty deep dive into mental accounting. We learned how our brains categorize money based on where it came from, what we intend to use it for, even our age, and whether we feel scarce or abundant.
We saw how this innate psychological tendency affects pretty much everyone, from teenagers' really emotional responses to money stuff to how adults handle bonuses and windfalls.
But most importantly, I think we discovered some powerful, actionable strategies, ways to recognize and challenge these biases. Things like adopting a unified financial framework, practicing mindful spending,
And even leveraging things like the pain of paying to our advantage or simplifying with that two-bucket system.
So, here's something to think about as we wrap up. Considering just how deep these roots of mental accounting go in our psychology, right from our developing teenage brains focused on relationships, all the way to the scarcity mindsets we might carry into adulthood. How might understanding these ingrained patterns change things? Not just our own personal financial decisions, but maybe also how we teach financial literacy to the next generation.
That's a really provocative thought to end on. How do we account for the mental side when we teach the mechanics of money? Definitely something worth pondering.